Welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Sophia. I'm a writer, musician, and creative, and I want to teach you how to write better. This week, we're looking at active versus passive voice. This is one of those pieces of writing advice that floats around a lot in workshops, lectures, and critiques, but isn't always very easy to understand. And unfortunately, it's a little bit grammatical in nature, but I promise to keep it simple. I will explain any fancy words I use, and of course, try to keep them to a minimum. Once you master this, your writing quality will skyrocket. As a writer myself, this is often something I forget about when I'm in the zone, and that's completely fine. As I've said before, and will say again, most of this writing advice is really revising advice. In your first draft, completing the book is your one and only objective. Then you make it good. So what are active and passive voice? Whose voice are we talking about? Well, to get started, we're going to need a quick grammar lesson. The example sentence is, Sophia wrote the book. In any given sentence, we could have a subject, verb, and object. In other words, the actor, the action, and the thing the action is affecting. In this sentence, Sophia is the subject, writing is the verb, and the book is the object. You may have heard that every sentence needs a noun and a verb at the minimum. That's still true. But today, we're focused on whether our noun is a subject or an object. Now, this is a very basic sentence, but what's important to note is that the person, Sophia, did the writing, not the book. And I did use a person in an actual object in our example, but it's worth noting that the subject is not always a person, and the object could also be any kind of noun: person, place, thing, idea, etc. I think this is why active and passive voice can be so difficult to distinguish. So let's talk about voice. You may hear this word come up a lot in the writing world, and it can mean a couple of different things. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to define voice as a narrative style. That's because most of the time you're not breaking a grammatical rule by writing something one way or the other. It's simply a stylistic difference. Let's go back to our example sentence. Sophia wrote the book. This sentence is an example of active voice, meaning the actor, subject, comes first. The book or object is secondary to the meaning of the sentence. Sophia wrote is just as grammatically correct as Sophia wrote the book. But hold on, that means the book is optional in this sentence. The advice that floats around, and the advice that I'll give you today, is to use the active voice as much as possible. This should be your default when you're writing, and it applies to more than what you think. For example, in the industry, we prefer writers to phrase dialogue tags in speaker-first format. Believe it or not, that's active voice. Think Sophia said instead of said Sophia. Again, it's a tiny thing and won't make a huge difference, but it will stand out and might sound weird to readers. And there are so many tiny things like this that come standard when formatting your novel, and I'll save those for a separate video. Hopefully now you can see how pervasive this advice is. So we've seen the active voice, but what is passive voice? Let's get back to our example sentence, only now in the passive voice. The book was written by Sophia. In this form, the subject, Sophia, is passive because she's at the end of the sentence. Now the book has all the attention. The subject actually has become entirely optional to the sentence. Passive voice simply means that the subject is secondary to the object. Most of the time, the object comes first in the sentence, and like Sophia, the subject is completely optional. The book was written is just as grammatically correct as the book was written by Sophia. Okay, so I did say this was a grammatical one, but how are we doing? Let's check in with a little quiz. Quiz time. Which sentence is active, meaning the subject is the star, and which one is passive, meaning the object takes the stage? Don't worry, this quiz is ungraded. It will not affect your final grade in my class. 1. You answered the question correctly. 2. The question was answered correctly by you. Go ahead and pause if you need more time. And for those of you lightning-fast grammar identifiers, I'm sure you knew that sentence 1 was active and sentence 2 was passive. And don't worry if that was difficult. Here's a super easy shortcut for figuring out whether you're looking at a subject or an object. The actor of any sentence is the subject. So who or what is doing the verb? Is the verb happening to something, to an object? Passive. Or is the actor doing the verb? Active. Now, those of you who were here last time may have noticed the pesky little to be verb in there as well. And yes, writing in the passive voice does force you to use these filler words that many of my other videos might tell you to delete. That's not a secret, not a surprise, and not a coincidence. But I'll admit us writers do nothing better than breaking the rules. And there are some benefits to writing in the passive voice. The first is that it masks the identity of the subject. We see this very often in mysteries where a person was killed, a jewel was stolen, etc. The deceased and the gem are the objects, and the subject's identity is unknown, both to the detective and to the reader. In this story, you wouldn't want to write John killed this man because it would literally ruin the mystery of the story, which is the point of a mystery. Little whodunit means we don't know who done it. Another instance where passive voice could come in handy is when creating momentary suspense or confusion. Game shows often do this when reading out the names of winners. The winner of season 8 is... This gives them time to dim the lights, play dramatic music, and cut to commercial before giving away the identity of the winner. But earlier I did tell you that active voice is most often the right choice. Why is that? It's because of a little thing called agency. Agency is a person's ability to do something or enact their own will. In fiction, we like to see main characters, or characters in general, with agency, meaning the things happening in the story are a direct result of that character's choices and action. We want main characters who play a role in their own success and failure throughout the story, rather than characters who float through the plot as it happens around them, or to them, outside of their control. Shout out Nick Carraway from The Great Gatsby. 99% of the time, giving your characters more agency will vastly improve your story. And the easiest way to do that is to write in the active voice. It gives the reader the impression that your character made the decision to produce the action. Even if they were tricked or manipulated by someone, a character that does things is usually more interesting than a thing that was done by a character. Just in the same way that a book was written by Sophia doesn't require Sophia to be mentioned, actions written in the passive voice make your character seem unnecessary to the story. And it is a story about them, isn't it? It should be. That and the passive voice adds many unnecessary words into your novel. Sophia wrote the book is 4 words, whereas the book was written by Sophia is 6. And while that seems like a small difference, it's not. Our first sentence has 3 vital, meaning-making words and 1 grammatical filler. The second has those same 3 meaning-making words and 3 more words of junk clogging up my beautiful story with was and by and the. That's the difference between a polished manuscript and one that still feels a little rough around the edges. Just to disclose my biases here, I do think that clear, succinct writing is good writing. Using fewer words makes every single one count. And not everybody does feel that way. But even the most floral, poetic writers would probably rather use words like sunlight gilded glaze than several instances of was and by and the. So while changing passive voice to active voice may feel like a very small change in our simple sentence, let's see if an entire paragraph will make it a little clearer. Example paragraph 1. Sophia wrote the book alone, so she could fill the room with her imagination. She let the characters sit beside her and whisper their stories onto the page. Example paragraph 2. The book was written alone by Sophia, so the room could be filled with her imagination. Sorry, I made that sound robotic. Let me try again. The book was written alone by Sophia, so the room could be filled with her imagination. The stories were whispered onto the page by her characters. I don't know about you, but the second paragraph felt repetitive, clunky, and much less clear than our first. However, writing is an art, not a science. Maybe you loved the second paragraph. Maybe your book needs the passive voice because your main character is incapable of acting according to their own will. Or maybe you're a mystery writer, and revealing a single identity would ruin the whole book. In any case, you should probably head over to my website for a free flowchart on just when it's okay to break the conventional rules of writing. As I said before, this is a style choice and not a hard and fast grammar rule. This week's homework is to come up with 2 or more sentences, one in active voice and one in passive. Post them in the comments below for full credit. We grade based on participation. Kudos for creativity and make them as colorful as you want, but please keep them PG-13. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like these in the future. Thank you so much for watching, friends, and as always, happy writing!